is The Weekly Show with David J. Maloney. This week, David talks to saxophonist Theodore Arthur. And now, here's your host, David J. Maloney.
Welcome to everyone at home, and I would normally say our studio audience to The Weekly Show. I'm your host, David J. Maloney. I say normally because we usually shoot the show before a small studio audience at the Hard Rock Hotel and Casino. But as you can see, we are still shooting from home due to increased coronavirus concerns. We do hope to gain clearance to get back to our live-to-tape shows real soon. So, for the second consecutive year, Pamplona, Spain has canceled the running of the Bulls because of the pandemic. Organizers say their policy has always been safety first. And according to the National Enquirer, Barbara Walters hasn't been seen in public since 2016. Friends fear she has become a recluse. Oh, and did you hear this? A prominent exorcist has warned that demons are now possessing people through their cell phones. Ironically, it's actually easier to get out of a deal with the devil than it is to get out of a cell phone contract. According to a new survey, 36% of Americans get most of their news from Facebook. To these people, today's top story is a guy you vaguely remember from high school needs prayer warriors for his 22-year-old cat. At least 14 NFL players have been arrested since the Super Bowl. To give you an idea of how bad it's gotten, this year on NBC's Sunday Night Football, Al Michaels and Chris Collinsworth will be joined in the booth by Nancy Grace. Lastly, recent reports show new cases of STDs have risen to a record high. Biologists place blame on the taping of upcoming season 18 of The Bachelorette. On tonight's show, we have a musician and artist who has traveled the country playing his famous tenor saxophone with blues and pop legends like Little Junior Parker, Bobby Bland, Tina Turner, Solomon Burke, and Aretha Franklin. He has continued the storied musical legacy of our Gulf Coast with the Alabama Music Hall of Fame award-winning band, the Excelsior Band. That man is the wonderful saxophonist Theodore Arthur, and he is here with us tonight. So don't go anywhere, and we'll be right back. Our featured guest tonight grew up on the Gulf Coast and found unlikely success in the music world, touring and recording with the likes of Bobby Bland, Tina Turner, Aretha Franklin, B.B. King, and countless other icons on his now famous tenor saxophone. Here to chat about life, music, and his work with the Alabama Music Hall of Fame award-winning band, the Excelsior Band, please give a warm Weekly Show welcome to saxophonist Theodore Arthur. Mr. Arthur, thank you so much for joining us.
Yes, sir. It's such a pleasure as well as an opportunity to be with such a fine host.
Well, I appreciate that. So your life kind of reads a little like a movie script when you think of where you started and where you ended up today. So let's start at the beginning. Where did you grow up?
Pritchard, Alabama.
What was life like for you growing up in the thick of the civil rights movement and all the changes happening in the early years?
I actually started my music career at Carver Elementary playing drums.
Oh, wow.
Mr. Alexander and Mr. Pratt were my teachers there. And when I got to 7th grade, Mr. Pratt was the band director, and he didn't need any more drummers. So he told Mother that, we don't need any more drummers, ma'am. I need clarinet players. So she was kind enough to buy me a clarinet, and I started lessons with him. He was my first teacher. And by the way, Mr. Pratt wound up playing with Ray Charles before he
Oh, wow.
Yes.
That's really cool. So you've mentioned that you have deep roots in Africatown, which makes your story even that much more remarkable. What's the story there? Was it your great-grandparents that were either on board or descendants of the Clotilda survivors?
Holy Allen was my great-grandfather. That was my mother's grandfather. So he was one of the slaves that came, the 110 that came over on the Clotilda. So we have a group called the Africatown Direct Descendants of the Clotilda, which I was eventually lifted up to be the president after Miss Ellis died in 2009. So that's where I stand on that. We are one of the few groups that know where our original foreparents came from and their locations and what they did when they got here.
So what did that family history mean to you growing up?
Well, it meant a tremendous amount of discipline, education, and the ability to stick to a task until you finish it. They had a real strong will for being self-contained. They loved about the idea of taking care of yourself. Take what you have, if it's little or nothing, and use it and make something out of it. That was the attitude they had.
Has that meaning grown deeper and as you've grown older?
Yes, sir. I had very little help from my mother and father, but no one else has really been sponsoring me in any kind of way. Everything that I've done, I've had to be creative about it, and Brother Maloney, and just make something out of nothing. I started with $27 when I started this last company, which is Cassinet Records, my record label. I had an offer for $50,000 for 3 months to take my band to the Far East in Las Vegas. They also, the Aladdin Theater offered me $5,000 a night for the band. I took them out there, all this on my own.
So was music a part of your home life and community growing up? I'm kind of wondering where this wonderful creative side of you came from.
Well, I guess a traditional thing in my family. Mother was a pianist. She actually gave me my first lesson on the piano. But as you know, young men and boys during that time loved baseball and football and playing in the street and shooting marbles and things. So I really didn't stick to it like I should have when I first was introduced to it. But as time went on, I became interested in the drums, and from the drums, the clarinet, I taught myself how to play the saxophone in the 10th grade. Oh, and by the way, that was a club in Mobile I played at called Rich 21 when I was 16. We were making $45 a week. That was the beginning of me really wanting to become a professional musician.
What kind of music were you allowed to listen to at home growing up?
Basically gospel, and we had, well, let me tell you something else that's very interesting. My cousin was the chief engineer at the first black radio station that was in Mobile, WMOZ. Vernon Floyd was the first engineer. So we were probably much able to hear all type of music. I was introduced to everything because, they had gospel shows and all of the other type of R&B and blues and everything on there. And then I listened to WLA a lot too for the country music. So I came up with a diversified attitude toward music. I learned to love all of it.
Did you have a favorite genre?
Jazz is what I've always loved more than anything else. But as you know, the blues is where I made the biggest imprint out here, and it was the most rewarding field that I was in. That's where I learned the most. I was introduced to the entire music industry through the blues more so than anything.
How did you get your start playing your now famous saxophone?
We had a band in high school called the Impalas, and my brother was learning how to play the trumpet. So I learned a little bit how to play the trumpet, and I tried to join the band playing the trumpet, but I wasn't that good at it. So there was a guy on the job before us had left his saxophone at the club, and they said, Theodore, pick up the saxophone and play it. So I did, and from that point on, I just taught myself how to play the saxophone.
Mobile has historically been filled with all kinds of talent, but did it have a thriving music scene back then?
Oh my goodness, yes. Well, let me tell you something very interesting, and I'll get back to that. One of my buddies was here yesterday. He and I met when he was in the 10th grade. I was in 10th grade. He went to Central High School, and I went to Blunt. Fred Wesley was here last night, and we've been friends since then. Even though we went to separate high schools, we spent a great deal of time together playing and practicing and putting bands together. And he actually was the one that got me the job with Ike and Tina Turner. So yes, sir, there has been a wealth of very talented musicians.
Theodore, we've got to go to a quick commercial break. Can you stick around till after the break?
Yes, sir. I surely can.
Your story obviously didn't stay in Pritchard in Africatown. How did you get your first big break? Was that with Little Junior Parker?
Yes, sir. Well, believe it or not, Marshall York, who had been with B.B. King, came off the road and stayed home a couple of years. And then Junior Parker and Bobby Bland split up. They were once a team. So once they split up, Junior Parker sent to Mobile to get Marshall York to come back on the road to help him put his band together. And so after he was out there about a year and a half, the tenor player got sick. And so Marshall suggested to them that they get me. Well, Mama didn't want me to go at first. I was 19. So we kept on, and she finally let me go. And that was the beginning of it.
Did Junior Parker have any connections to Mobile? I mean, how did he find out about you exactly?
Well, through Marshall York. Marshall York was the bass player.
Okay.
He had been with Bobby, B.B. King. And also, he also had a drummer that was in the Impalas with me. A guy that went to high school with me, Randolph Odom, was the drummer that was with Junior Parker. So yes, he had quite a number of musicians from Mobile too.
Do you remember your final day in Mobile before you headed off to meet with them?
They took me with them. Our first job was in Clarksville, Tennessee, when we left Mobile.
What made you think at that time that you could actually make a career and provide for yourself by playing music? At what point did you go, oh, I can make a living doing this?
Well, let's put it this way. It was something ingrained in my brain that I wanted to be a musician, and I wanted to be more than just a side man. I've always had the idea that I wanted to be the leader of the band. And so with that thought in mind, I just kept working on my fundamentals and basics. And when the other people were asleep, I was studying music and the business of music and all kind of other information to help me really secure a future in this.
With the shows that you started doing with Little Junior Parker, kind of take us back those times a little bit. I mean, for people who didn't live it, what were those initial shows like?
Oh man, it was so much fun. I couldn't believe that a man that played harmonica and sang the blues only could draw so many people every night. We had some phenomenal times, great audiences to play for. And we had a dynamite 7-piece band at that time. So all the music that I had been studying in high school, as a matter of fact, Ray Charles was the one that influenced me the most with music and jazz and blues. And he had just produced the album on one of his side men, David Fathead Newman. And so Mr. Pratt was playing that music at school because he was learning everything on that album. So everything he would learn, I would go home and learn it myself. So that was the thing that motivated me more than anything else to want to be a musician.
How did you get connected with Bobby Bland eventually?
That was in 1966, and you won't believe it. It was the Wednesday night after Mardi Gras. I was sitting at home, the phone rang, and that was Mr. Jackson with Bobby Bland Band called and asked me if I would like to come play with them. He said, Mr. Bobby Bland wanted me to join the band. So I said, yeah, but because, see, he has heard me play when I was with Junior Parker.
If I'm not mistaken, you were on one of Dick Clark's shows. Maybe was it American Bandstand with Bobby and his band to perform?
Oh, absolutely. That was wonderful. I'm talking about, it was just so many marvelous things that happened when I was with him. We were in Hollywood and we went to be on the Dick Clark show. And we played, I remember, Turn On Your Love Light was the number that was hot at that time. And we played that on that show, and I never will forget the interview. Sometimes I'd like to show it to you if you haven't seen it. It's a very outstanding performance.
Did you record with Bobby as well?
Oh, absolutely. I sure did. Bobby Bland and B.B. King made an album together, Bobby Bland, B.B. King together for the first time. If you look on the back of that album, you'll see my name. I was on that album, and I played the solo on Don't Cry No More on that particular album. And then we've done I did several other recordings with him too in the studio, both he and Junior Parker.
What's your favorite memory of playing with Bobby?
That is one of the most enjoyable times in my entire career. We had such a wonderful time. I mean, it's just like, that was probably one of the most difficult audiences to play for in the country.
Oh, they're known to be the most difficult. They are by far known to be the most. They're the pickiest, and they will. That audience will cut you down if they don't like you.
You know exactly what to say. So absolutely, we had a great time, and we had some of the largest crowds that came out to see blues artists in New York City. So that was my premier moment, I believe, with Bobby being in New York City.
So is playing with Bobby what connected you to B.B. King eventually?
Oh, no.
How did that come about?
Well, when I first came off the road with Bobby in 1962, B.B. King came out to Club Harlem to play after one of his shows, and I was playing in a band out there. And he wanted me to join him. He offered me $18,000 a year at 1982 to join him. But I didn't go because Bobby Bland had sent for me to come back to work with him. So we had such a great relationship. I mean, I love B.B. King. B.B., the bass player that got me the job with Junior Parker was once B.B. King's bass player. So that's how I was introduced to him in the first place, back in 1958.
Do you have a favorite memory around your time with B.B. King?
Yes, sir. We had some great times together because we did a couple of shows together after that album came out. And he was always such a wonderful guy to be around. You talk about a gentleman and a terrific guitar player. B.B. King is one of the most outstanding blues musicians I've ever met.
So we've covered 2 or 3 big parts of your story, but there's so many legends around you and places you've been and people you've played with. I mean, Tina Turner, Solomon Burke, B.B. King. Is there a story kind of in your back pocket that no one would ever believe?
Well, I'm sure they wouldn't believe that we had one of the most outstanding bands Mobile has ever seen. A group called the Total Sound right here in Mobile. And we are at the same time, I had a jazz band called the Mobile Jazz Quartet, which was also an outstanding bunch of musicians.
Speaking of Mobile, what brought you back to Mobile?
My brother Fred Wesley got me with Bobby John, who was one of Ike Turner's singers. He had a band in Los Angeles. I stayed out there about 6 months. While I was there, Fred introduced me to a record producer, D. Irvin, and D hired me to do 2 arrangements. And I did one and I let Fred do the other one. But, well, will you believe the one that I did came out? So if you ever get a chance to look at Betty Everett, Ain't Nothing Gonna Change Me on YouTube, the horn arrangement was done by me on that record.
Oh, wow.
So that's how I got to Los Angeles. And then stayed out there for a while, and I got a job with a band called the Band of Bachelors, and we went to Oklahoma and played several jobs all through Texas and Oklahoma. And then when they got ready to return to Los Angeles, I decided to come back to Mobile. Well, once I was in Mobile, that band I mentioned earlier, the Total Sound was just happening in Mobile, and we started playing at the Dashiki. We started packing the houses. We could only play Thursday, Friday, and Saturday night.
Now, you've taught generations of Mobilians in the school system how to play music at this point. Why do you feel music is so important?
Everyone that studies music does much better in their other subjects due to the fact that you have to be really dedicated to the proposition of learning. You have to have a strategic amount of discipline, and you have to learn to remember things. And so it behooves us to become dedicated students that's the one thing. Most people that play music, they have to spend a lot of time with it to perfect it. And I haven't been a teacher. I didn't graduate from college, but what I did, I learned a lot from just being exposed to musicians, and I studied a lot about other instruments. So I worked for the city of Mobile at the recreation, parks and recreation part for the last 25 years. And that's how I was able to teach some of these people.
How did you originally get involved with the Excelsior Band? I mean, did you know about them before you joined?
I was in the union, and when I got back off the road with Junior Parker, you had to be a union musician to be in the band. So Mr. Sweeney, who was the secretary at that time, recommended that I call Mr. James Seals and ask him about a job. And I did, and he hired me. So that was 55 years ago. I've been in the Excelsior Band 55 years.
So why do you think it's important for the Excelsior Band as a living part of our heritage to continue playing?
Well, for one reason, the band started in 1883, and it has been a very, very prominent part of our entertainment and cultural enrichment in Mobile, Alabama. This is one of the most outstanding organizations in Mobile, and the longevity of it tells me that we need to try to keep it active as long as we possibly can. Nobody ever quits the band. They either pass away or become incapacitated before they leave. So.
I hate to laugh at that, but
it's true.
The way that you said it, it's just the way that you said it was like. So I know that by the time this episode airs, you will have had your music anniversary celebration, and
yes, sir.
And it's my understanding that James Brown's band leader, Fred Wesley, would be coming down for it. How did you become friends with him?
Well, in the 10th grade, like I said earlier, he was at Central and I was at Blount. We met then, and we've been friends ever since then. Even though we were going to rival schools, every day we could spend together after we met, we spent a lot of time together. He has been one of my best musical friends in the whole universe. Fred is one of the best trombone players in the world. And he was here last night. He came to we had a rehearsal in my band. I have a 16-piece orchestra now, the Gulf Coast Jazz and Blues Orchestra. And we had our first rehearsal last night in 2 years. So he was here for that. And
was it good to finally get back after like 2 years to be able, was it like getting back on a bicycle?
Man, it was like getting a dinner after you've been hungry for 3 months, you know.
Oh, wow.
So it was great. It was simply great. And we enjoyed having Fred here. He's one of the most outstanding musicians I've ever known. And my best friend, he happened to be my best friend in the whole world.
Well, I'll tell you what, we really, I've enjoyed the time that we've spent with you. And I really, really appreciate you being on the show. Ladies and gentlemen, Theodore Arthur.
Y'all just be sure and tell the world about the 30th year anniversary of Theodore Arthur Jr. at the locale. And Brother Maloney, I really appreciate you so much for having me. This is
thank you for being on. That is our show for tonight. Thank you so much for watching. A special thanks to Theodore Arthur for joining us. Stay safe, everyone.